MMA rants and raves, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu versus striking versus wrestling. Guys, I've been meaning to do a vlog on this for a while now. And the longer I waited, the more interesting it got, because mixed martial arts is still evolving. That's what's great about this sport. It just continues to grow, and it grows in just a short period of time. There's so many fights happening, there's so many events happening, that you see the individualistic types of mixed martial arts growing parallel to each other, because this is like a sport within a sport. It's a rendezvous of sports coming together. So it's very interesting to analyze all of them happening at once. Now let's talk about all the aspects of mixed martial arts. Now I narrowed it down to three very important aspects. I see Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, striking, and wrestling as being the three most significant. Now if you take those three, which is the most significant? So let's talk about all three of them. Let's look at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Very significant. I mean, you have to have a ground game in this sport. If you're forced to the ground, whether defensive or offensively, you have to have some kind of idea of what to do. So, I mean, it's really important. I mean, how many fights have been won by submission? And a lot of that is accredited to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So it's a really significant part of this sport. And many fighters have made a career out of it. Look at Minotauro Nogueira. I mean, he's a legend specifically because of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, right? And look at a lot of other great fighters. You look at Anderson Silva. I mean, he has it in his cocktail of many mixed martial arts because he's very well-rounded. And it's used even by heavyweights. The only one I can think of is like Frank Mir, who really is very good at it. Is one of the best at it for a guy who's that big, of course. And he's had a lot of success with it. I mean, he broke Tim Sylvia's arm when he got the championship belt. So that was his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu at work. How many big super heavyweights? I mean, now he's more like a super heavyweight at 265, can have that kind of talent. So it's really important. It's important to have fighters have become legends based on it. I mean, you just look at Damian Maia, he just got a title shot now. He's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu master. He really doesn't do anything else. Besides that, everything else he has is like a standard type of fighting style, which is not really the best. His art is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He's the best at it, one of the best at it. And, it's taken him all the way to a title shot. So it's very significant. Okay, let's talk about the next one, which is striking. Striking, arguably one of the best. Just look at what fighters have done. 2 of the 5 UFC champions right now have got there and have made their name based on striking. Look at Anderson Silva. He made a living off striking. That's his bread and butter, right? When I say striking, of course, I mean punches and kicks. And you have legends in the sport of the past, that are still fighting, like Mirko Krokop, pure striker right there. Tim Sylvia, former UFC champion, striker. Andrei Arlovsky, a lot of success, also a striker. Chuck Liddell, the names, and the list goes on. And 2 of the champions, like I said, you have Anderson Silva and you have Lyoto Machida, also one of the best strikers out there. And I'm not going to even mention Fedor in this vlog because he's so good at everything. He's like the best at everything. So with him it's not fair, because with him it's pick your poison. The expression pick your poison, it doesn't work better with anybody than it does with Fedor. So let's just talk about these other fighters, other great fighters in the UFC, for example. So you got 2 champions that are pure strikers. So obviously striking is very significant. And I just want to mention something else, that the reason I'm talking about the fighters now is because the most important thing is really to look at the present, what it's doing now. This sport, like I said, continues to evolve. Anyway, let's look at the next one, wrestling. Now, what has wrestling done for the sport? What has wrestling done for fighters? In my opinion, to coin a phrase, if it hasn't been coined yet, wrestling reigns. To me, it is the most significant mixed martial art than all of them. Andy the Natural Couture, 5-time world champion, one of the greatest mixed martial artists of all time, did it with wrestling. Let's look at the current 5 UFC champions right now. Frankie Edgar, of course he won that belt with striking. Well, what was the deciding factor? It was those 2 takedowns. The judges saw it. And that's how he won the fight. And of course, by definition, he's a wrestler. He's a wrestling coach. So it's his wrestling that makes the difference. He is the lightweight champion right now. Now let's look at another guy, the current UFC champion, UFC interim champion in the heavyweight division, Shane Carwin. How did he win that fight against Frank Mir, his biggest challenge? Classic textbook Randy the Natural Couture. He took Frank Mir, classic Roman Greco, dirty boxing, pushed him up against the cage, did it twice. The ref bailed him out the first time. He did it a second time when Frank Mir got the second life, and look what he did. He dominated Frank Mir, punched him, knocked him down, and that was the end of it. You know, it was the Roman Greco and the mugging and the dirty boxing, and that's what it was. Shane Carwin is using wrestling, and he used it to glory. I mean, he got his UFC heavyweight belt. One of the biggest proofs of all, Brock Lesnar. All Brock Lesnar does is wrestle. He's not going to stand up with you. He's not a jiu-jitsu guy. He's not going to submit you. He's going to take you down, smother you, control you, pass your guard, and basically drop bombs on you. Lunchbox-sized fists that he's just going to smash on top of you. Former NCAA champion. I mean, you know, the guy's a pure wrestler. And that's all he does. He doesn't have anything else. I mean, if you have a guy that just does one thing, let's say Damian Maia, all he does is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I mean, look what happened when he fought a guy that's well-rounded. When he fights a guy that knows something else, that's a boxer or a striker, what is he going to do? You see, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu helps you when you're on the ground, but you have to have the means to get the person to the ground, and that's what wrestling does. It's hard with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. You know, if you're a wrestler, you shoot for takedowns, you have the speed if you're very good at it. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu can help you with grappling, but it's really effective once you have your opponent already on the ground. So I see wrestling as being superior to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And look what it's done for Lesnar. So let's move on to another fighter, and this really cements my opinion. You know, this is really what does it. GSP. I mean, here you have a guy. I mean, if this doesn't prove it, what does? Here you have a guy who's not a wrestling pedigree. He had to learn wrestling on his own. I mean, he said to himself, look, I'm a brutally strong guy. Pound for pound, I'm one of the strongest guys, probably the strongest guy in MMA. His legs are solid, his body's solid, he has a powerful torso. And what was he doing? He was a striker, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu guy. He said, you know what? I'm going to learn wrestling. I think I can really go far with this. I think I can dominate my opponents. And look what's happened. He just completely evolved. He's a totally different fighter. Look at what happened after the Matt Serra fight. Right? He became a wrestler. He just said, look, I'm going to take this guy down and use all my strengths. You know, that's what wrestling does. It's great about it. You don't just use your hands for striking or your legs. You're using everything. Your upper body, your torso, your lower body, your legs, your calves. Everything is going into it when you wrestle. So it's a very dominant aspect of mixed martial arts. GSP is making a living off it. He's becoming a legend, possibly one of the greatest pound-for-pound fighters out there just because of wrestling. He does a lot of other stuff, but you know, he's doing good wrestling. You see his fights, they're typical. He gets the opponent down and just lays down on them, passes their guard, tries to get them into a submission, which is what he does with his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but the whole point of it is that he can dominate his opponent, even if he can't get the submission, like what he did to Hardy, what he did to Alves. I mean, it's amazing what wrestling can do. And that cements my opinion, guys. You know, it's many fighters in the past too. You look at Mark Coleman; he invented the whole ground and pound. He's a Olympic class wrestler. And then you look at the Masashi and King Mo fight. What better proof is there? All King Mo is a wrestler, a very good wrestler. That's all he does. And look what he did to Masashi. He was a very well-rounded fighter. Masashi couldn't do anything because he was being taken down all the time. Even if you can strike the guy on your back, it's not going to be that effective. You're going to win the fight because you're the guy on top and you're the guy in control. So in my opinion, wrestling is the most important aspect of mixed martial arts. I'd like to know what you think. So leave your comments, let me know. Please rate this video, please subscribe, and thank you for tuning in.